Yo, what's good guys, Mark coming through to you from the Nintendo Network, and I'm back with another Rell video, but today's one's going to be a bit different because I'm going to be taking an in-depth analysis into the combat. I'm going to go over a lot of things. I'm going to go over the basics, I'm going to go from intermediate to advanced. I'm going to teach you a bunch of stuff that we already know about the game, and yeah. But before we do actually get into it, I just want to say, the support has actually been going crazy. Like, I've jumped from like 150 subs to 220 in 2 videos, and it's like, holy. But hey, if you want to keep supporting me, if you enjoy my content, I'd really appreciate a sub. You're going to see me on your homepage or much more because I'm going to be uploading a lot more. And yeah, I've got a Discord, by the way. I've got a Discord, I'll put it in the description. But yeah, check out some of my stuff. So now to start things off, I'm going to start with weapons, because weapons is so broad. It is possibly one of the most broad things in the game, because there's different categories for the weapons. But within those weapon categories, they are so varied. So now from the way it seems right now, the main sort of weapons that we have in the game are daggers, guns, swords, and greatswords. Now all of these classes differentiate from each other quite a lot, with each of them having very defining features. For example, the dagger is incredibly fast but has a very low damage output, whereas the greatsword is very slow but has an incredibly high damage output. I think the most interesting one of all these classes is the gun one, because we never really ever see a gun class in games where it actually works. But for the gun, it seems like it has longer range, and the attack speed varies because there's a lot of guns in the game, but it also seems to be quite weak, or weak damage wise at least. But with that being said, that practically concludes everything you need to know about weapons, and now we move on to the basics of combat. So now to start off the basics of combat, we're going to be talking about M1s, and every game has them. Everyone knows what an M1 is, but just to break it down, it is your main attack tool within the game, and practically every weapon and every fruit has a unique M1. So that just goes as far, that goes to show how varied this game is. So now one of the biggest pieces of information that we got in movie 2 was that attacks have no keyframe restrictions. So your M1s are going to be able to speed up and slow down to your liking. And I'm going to talk more about this later on, because this is going to be very important for combat. And so now onto the next basic part of combat, we have the heavy attack. So now this attack is slower, it has more wind up, and it's easier to predict than the M1. However, it can block break, and it can be used in the air. This attack is pretty good because it will force your opponent to either parry or dodge, because getting hit by it will immediately break their block, or it will do a lot of damage. However, it's also really important to be careful with the way you use it, because if you use it from far away, you slow down as you get closer to them. And now moving on to your main form of defense in this game, and that's going to be blocking. So blocking is something that everyone's going to have to do. It's the most easy way of preventing damage being dealt to you, but it also is one of the weaker forms. And I say this because your block can be broken. As you heard me say earlier with a heavy attack can break your block, and multiple other attacks can do it as well, but they're more so abilities. So now moving on to your next defensive option in the game, with that being your parry. So now your parry works a bit different to the way your block does, because it has a much more precise window to land. Also, if you do miss a parry, then you'll be in a bad position. Trust me, you don't want to miss your parries. However, they are a very good tool, because if you do land a parry, then your opponent gets stunned. So now using this against a heavy attack is very important. Now it's important to remember that this is a completely different game to a lot of games on the platform right now. It's not like games like Deep Woken where you can use your parry quite often, because in this game in Rell Seas, your parry is on cooldown and you have to work to get your parry bar up again. So now your final major form of defense in the game is dodging. And now dodging has 4 different directions of movement. You can move left and right and back and forth. So now with that being said, your left and right share a cooldown, whilst your back and forth share a cooldown. In addition to this, your left and right actually have iframes. So this will more so be your go-to option for avoiding attacks. And so that basically wraps everything up for the basic pieces of combat. And trust me, I know it doesn't sound too in-depth right now, but it gets techie. I'm telling you, it gets techie. We're about to move on to the intermediate bit, and you're going to see how in-depth this combat can really get. And so now to start off the intermediate parts of combat, we have throws, and you may have seen this in movie 2. This is like one of the big pieces that they revealed for the combat, and basically it's used as a tool to get them off you after a combo, or to create distance between you and the person. So now it's triggered by pressing heavy and your M1 at the same time. So now this move is incredibly versatile because it is very directional. So depending on where you're facing is where they'll get thrown. So you can throw them beneath you, you can throw them into the sky, or you can throw them far away from you, like straight into a wall. It'd actually be kind of funny if you were fighting a fruit user and you kind of threw him into the ocean. But anyways, back to what I was saying. They have iframes at the end of them, so you need to be careful when using it, because if you use it in a position where they get off the ground and they have iframes still, they're most likely going to get the first hit in before you. So now on to the next piece of information about the intermediate levels of combat. We have ground slams, and this was also shown in movie 2. Now we don't actually know too much about this. However, they seem pretty useful, because from the way it looks right now, they have a long wind up, and I believe that they're going to be able to block break. And the reason for this is because every other piece of damage in this game that has a long wind up or takes a while to get out will block break. So now we don't actually know how to trigger this attack, but we do know that you can only use it in the air. And now on the topic of using attacks in the air, we have the up tilt, which is used as a way to knock your opponent into the air during combos. So now you may have seen this in other games. I know it's in games such as GPO, typical anime fighting games. And now this is a move that is going to be very important, because it's going to be a very good way of linking your attacks with your moves and abilities. I wouldn't be surprised if a large amount of combos in this game do require this, so it would be a pretty good idea to get used to using it. So now it's time to talk about the most recent addition to the combat, and that is clashing. So now clashing occurs when two people use a heavy attack and clash right into each other. So now, from what it seems like right now, this seems as a good way to react to a heavy attack, especially if you don't have your parry available. Upon landing a clash, no one is actually damaged and no one gets the upper hand, because both of the people involved in it will be launched backwards. So now I feel like this is really good. I think this is a really nice addition, because it's going to keep the combat very fast paced. It's going to keep people on their toes, and I think that's what we need, because a lot of Roblox games right now have incredibly slow combat, and it just makes the game not fun. And since we're on the topic of clashing, it's also very important to note that there's not only clashing with heavy attacks, there's also clashing with projectiles, and I think this is mostly for fruits. So if two fruits use an ability that are projectiles and they're of the same magnitude or the same size or similar at least, then they will clash into each other with them disappearing. So now I'm not sure if it's going to be like how it is in like Dragon Ball games, where if an attack is stronger than the other, then it will go through it and end up hitting the person. But right now it seems like they just disappear on clashing. So now on to the final piece of information for the intermediate bit of combat, and that is iframes. So I feel like practically every game that has iframes, I'm guessing most of you know what they are. But for those of you that don't know, they stand for invulnerability frames. So now iframes are caused at the end of a combo. So if you're getting hit with a combo and it ends, then you'll have iframes on certain conditions. For example, you know how the throw is in the game. If you get hit with a throw, you'll have iframes after that. You may have heard me mention that earlier. Now, this is really good as it prevents stuff like infinite combos occurring. Because without iframes, you can be hit like right after a combo. It causes things such as infinite combos, because if you get hit into a wall, you have nowhere to escape to, and you can just constantly be hit. Okay, so now that we're done with the intermediate part of the game, I'm hoping you're starting to see how techy this game can get, because trust me, it is layered. Like already you're seeing stuff about iframes, you're seeing stuff about throws. This game has features that no other game has right now. But now before we actually do go into the advanced bit of the combat, I'm going to take a moment to talk about the poster system inside the game. Because trust me, this is probably what's going to affect your build, and it's going to affect your combat more than anything. So now to put it short, the poster system is practically what gives you your passives and your soft abilities in the game. And now when I say there's a lot of these in the game, there are loads of them, there's tons. With there being, I don't even know how many there is, but there's so many. And now the reason why there's so many is because the Rollrunners want it to be so that everyone's build is completely unique. And they don't want it to be like there's a meta. They don't want a meta to be a thing. They want every single one of them to be viable, so that you can use them in any way you want. But now the posters come in 3 different categories. They come in your fierce, your tactic, and your agile. So now for the fierce category of your posters, it seems like they're going to be the ones that greatly affect your M1s and your damage output. For example, there's ones that give you a 5% damage buff, and there's other ones that let you win M1 clashes. On the other hand, your tactic category is what gives you more defensive options. So for example, there's certain ones that let you get out your parries faster, and there's certain ones that let you regain your parries faster. And so now the final category of the poster system in the game is your agile. And now the agile ones tend to focus on your mobility more so than anything. However, there are ones that affect your attacks. So for example, there's one that lets you launch up to your opponent after doing an air combo and do an air grab. So now you're starting to see how versatile these posters can really get. It's also important to mention that you can only have one of each of these categories. You can only have one fierce, you can only have one tactic, and you can only have one agile. And so now the way that you obtain these posters is very interesting. So as you know, there are different factions and there's different crews within the game. And the way you interact with these crews and factions will determine the type of posters that you get. I believe that you can also get them through boss drops. It only seems logical. I think this was actually stated in one of the movies, I can't remember. But I think through boss drops, through interacting with the factions, through doing quests, stuff like that, they will give out posters. So now finally we move on to the advanced bits of combat, and trust me, you're going to see why I say this game has depth, and you're going to see why I say it's techie. Because the stuff that we've seen so far is insane. And just to kick things off, I'm going to be talking about weapon swapping. So now in the game, you can have multiple different types of weapons, and you are not limited to your class. So if you start off with a regular sword, then you can still pick up a gun and still be able to use it. However, it won't be as effective. But this is where weapon swapping comes into the picture, because when you use your weapon, your main weapon in an attack, you can switch to your other weapon to alter your combos and have different effects. So now this is highly important because I feel like this is going to be one of the main ways of keeping your attack pattern less predictable. In addition to this, I don't know if this is 100%, but it seems like when you swap between your weapons, you can extend your combo further than you would by keeping it to 1. Now onto the next part of the advanced section of combat, and we have keyframe variation. So now, as I said earlier, there's no keyframe restrictions within the game, and this allows you to slow and speed up your attack pattern. So now, depending on how you swing your weapon, it's going to determine how easy it is to parry you. So for example, someone who swings their weapon at the same speed constantly will be 10 times easier to parry compared to someone who will slow and speed down their attack pattern. So now onto the next piece of information about the advanced section of combat, and we have combo extending. So now I'm pretty sure that most of you know what combo extending is, but it is something that's usually hard to do. So for example, in some games you have abilities that if hit, it will stun your opponent, and that stun will allow you to get more hits. So now typically when using a stun, you usually use it to link one M1 to the next one, or a set of M1s to the next one. However, there are much more options. So now combo extending is something that you're going to have to learn if you want to have long combos, if you want to have high damage. And once the game has been out for a while and people have gotten a hang for the combat, practically everyone is going to be using it. And now the final piece for the advanced combat is going to be combo ending. So now in games, combo ending is practically everywhere, but it usually is used to create distance between you and the person you're fighting. For example, in Rell, we already know that the grab throw is a combo ender, because once it's used, you cannot get close to them or you cannot attack them. And once again, typically your combo ender will end with them having iframes. So now it's important to know when to use certain attacks, because it may be your combo ender and it may prevent you from racking up more damage than you would. And that practically concludes everything you need to know about the base combat, from basic to intermediate to advanced. And I do plan on making another video that talks about how Haki and Devil Fruits are going to impact your combat, because trust me, they will impact your combat just as much as everything I said in this video. But hey, I really hope you guys enjoyed. I had a lot of fun making this video. If you guys have been enjoying the Rell content, let me know down below. Leave me a comment, drop me a sub. Make sure you turn notifications on so you know when I upload. But yeah, thanks to everyone who made it to the end of the video. I really appreciate you guys. I'll see you in a bit.